A millionaire found an unconscious girl in the park and took her to his mansion. When she woke up, Raphael West walked through the shadowed city park, the damp grass soaking the edges of his polished shoes. At 38, the millionaire CEO of West Global Hospitality was a man of precision, his empire built on luxury resorts that defined perfection. But tonight, after an unexpected site inspection for a new eco-resort, he'd chosen to walk off the weight of the day rather than head straight to his penthouse. The park was eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of rain, when he spotted her, a motionless figure on the edge of the path, nearly swallowed by the shadows, like a fallen leaf. But she was unconscious, her shallow breaths fading into the night, her skin pale and ice-cold. Without thinking, Raphael knelt beside her, unwrapping the scarf from his neck to drape around her trembling shoulders, then removing his coat to cover her fragile frame. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, his voice steady, despite the urgency tightening his chest. She was feather-light as he lifted her into his arms, her head lolling against his shoulder, wet strands of hair clinging to her cheek. Her lips moved faintly, her voice a desperate murmur. "Don't let them find me." Raphael's jaw clenched. Someone or something had driven her to this. Sure. At his sprawling estate, the staff froze at the sight of their composed employer carrying a stranger, but Raphael waved them off. "Guest room. Call Dr. Mason. Urgent but discreet," he ordered, his voice clipped as he carried her up the marble staircase. He laid her gently on the guest bed, tucking a blanket around her as she murmured in her sleep, her body restless. Dr. Mason arrived swiftly, his examination thorough. "Exhausted, dehydrated, bruised. No life-threatening injuries," he reported, adjusting his glasses. "She needs rest, warmth, and hydration. Keep her calm. Possible emotional shock or mild amnesia." Raphael nodded, his arms crossed as he stood at the doorway, his gaze fixed on her delicate form. She looked young, maybe in her mid-20s, her face peaceful yet marked by faint scars and faded bruises, signs of a past filled with struggle. As Raphael adjusted the blanket, he noticed something, a small tattoo beneath her hairline, a subtle, stylized symbol. His breath caught. He recognized it as a variant of the Caldwell Travel Group's logo, his fiercest rival, a company notorious for unethical practices. Was this a coincidence, a trap, or a broken soul fleeing danger? Raphael sat in the armchair across the room, his hands steepled, his mind racing. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but tonight something had cracked through his carefully built armor. As dawn filtered through the cream-colored curtains, the scent of fresh linen and lavender filling the room, the woman stirred. Adriana, that's what he'd later learn her name to be, opened her eyes, blinking at the ornate ceiling, disoriented by the unfamiliar elegance. She winced as she tried to sit up, her body sore. A faint knock broke the silence, and Raphael entered, dressed in a slate-gray suit, his expression calm but unreadable. "You're awake," he said quietly, placing a tray on the bedside table, water, and a light meal. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice softening. Adriana's eyes widened, her breath hitching as she whispered, "Please, don't take me back there." Adriana's voice trembled as she whispered, "Please, don't take me back there." Her eyes wide with a flicker of fear as she sat up in the guest bed, the morning light filtering through the cream-colored curtains. Raphael West stood by the bedside, his slate-gray suit impeccable, but his expression softened with concern. "Thank you," she rasped, giving him a faint nod. He pulled the armchair closer, sitting across from her, his steady gaze searching her pale face. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked gently. After a long pause, she hesitated. "Just Adriana, for now." Raphael didn't press, sensing her fragility. "Do you remember what happened?" Adriana shook her head slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bits and pieces. Running. A car. A man yelling. Then cold." Raphael studied her, no fear in her gaze now, just exhaustion, as if she were too tired to lie, or perhaps too broken to pretend. You were in the park near my property, unconscious, injured. I brought you here and had a doctor check you over. You're safe. Her brow furrowed and she turned her head slightly, avoiding his eyes. Why would you help a stranger? His answer was simple, his tone unwavering. Because you needed help. A faint smile touched her lips, but she didn't meet his gaze. You don't even know if I'm dangerous, she murmured. Raphael's voice held no malice, only honesty. I'm still watching. Over the next few days, Adriana remained in the guest suite, regaining her strength with rest and small meals. She spoke little, but always politely, her quiet presence quickly endearing her to the staff. Mrs. Glenn, the longtime housekeeper, brought her fresh flowers each morning, placing them by her bedside with a warm smile. Matteo, the chef, crafted special soups for her and taught her to fold dumplings in the kitchen, laughing as she fumbled with the dough. Raphael observed from a distance, noting how she helped with simple chores, stacking books in the library, journaling in the solarium, showing no signs of deceit, no calls, no emails, just a gentle sincerity that felt disarming. On the fourth day, Raphael found her in the garden with Mrs. Glenn, repotting herbs under the warm sun. Adriana's hair was loosely pulled back, sleeves rolled to her elbows, dirt smudging her hands as she smiled softly at the older woman. She looked like she belonged, the sunlight warming her cheeks, but belonging didn't erase Raphael's questions. Later that evening, as Adriana passed by his study, Raphael glanced up from his laptop, catching a glimpse of her. Her hair shifted, revealing that mark again, the delicate tattoo beneath her hairline. He stood abruptly, his voice firm but calm. Adriana. She froze, turning slightly. Yes? Your neck. May I see something? Confused, she brushed her hair aside, exposing the symbol. Raphael's eyes narrowed as he pulled a binder from his bookshelf, flipping to a page with the logo of Harmony Trails, a program under Caldwell Global, his fiercest rival, known for exploitative practices masked as humanitarian efforts. That symbol. It's from one of their projects in Southeast Asia, he said, his tone measured but intense. Adriana's face went pale, her hand instinctively touching her neck. I don't remember, she stammered, her voice small. Maybe I volunteered, I don't know why it's there. I hate it. Her hands trembled, her words heavy with shame. Every time I think of it, I feel ashamed. Raphael nodded slowly, the air thick with uncertainty, his heart torn between wanting to protect her and the logic screaming to send her away. Raphael West stood in his study, the empty hallway stretching before him, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. At 38, the millionaire CEO of West Global Hospitality had spent years building walls around his heart, but Adriana's quiet presence had chipped away at them. Her tattoo, a symbol tied to his rival, Caldwell Global, had fueled his suspicion, yet his heart ached to protect her. He couldn't shake the question. Was he afraid of danger, or was he afraid of falling in love? He'd reached out to old contacts, former employees, village leaders, humanitarian networks, telling himself it wasn't distrust, but protection for both of them. Adriana had no idea. She continued to live with a quiet purpose, her presence a gentle warmth in the mansion. At dinner one evening, she spoke softly about helping a stranger at the market, her voice trailing off as if reaching for a memory she couldn't grasp. Raphael said nothing, but the way she smiled through the haze tugged at him. Still, doubt lingered. Until a rainy afternoon changed everything. Adriana was in the greenhouse, tending to herbs, when she spotted a man with a camera through the hedge. He wasn't staff, not familiar. She froze, then bolted, not toward the house, but into the woods. An hour later, Mrs. Glenn called Raphael, her voice frantic. Adriana's gone. He didn't think. He ran, the storm swallowing the sky, rain soaking him to the bone as he shouted her name. At the edge of the lake, he found her on a bench, small and shaking, her voice bitter. "I should have known. You were watching me, maybe not you, but someone you sent." Raphael stood silent, the rain dripping from his hair. "I had to be sure," he finally said, his tone heavy. She let out a bitter laugh. "Sure of what? That I'm dangerous? That I'm lying?" He didn't answer. "I trusted you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But people like me don't get rescued. We get used, over and over." Raphael stepped closer, his chest hollow. "Adriana." "No," she cut him off, tears mixing with the rain. "I don't even know who I am, but for a while your kindness felt real. I let myself believe I deserved it, but I don't." "I can't be your question mark." She turned, her voice resolute. "I don't want to hurt you, but I won't let myself be hurt again." She walked away, leaving Raphael in the storm, his heart heavy with regret. The next morning the air was crisp, but Raphael's thoughts were a tangled mess. A contact in Singapore had sent the final piece of the puzzle. Adriana Rains, former executive assistant and public liaison for Jason Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Global Travel, Raphael's cunning rival. Essentially, she'd been the face of Harmony Trails, a program Raphael knew was a front for exploitation. Photos showed her smiling but tired beside Jason at events, her eyes telling a story of silent suffering. She'd disappeared suddenly, her fear and avoidance now making sense. She'd been deep in Jason's empire, and she'd run. Raphael walked to the garden where Adriana stood by the roses, gently touching a new bud. Her smile faded as she saw his face. "You found something," she said quietly. He nodded, his voice laced with pain. "I know who you are now." Adriana lowered her eyes. "Then you probably know why I tried so hard to forget." Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to be that girl anymore, the one who smiled beside a monster, who helped him sell lies." Adriana Rains stood by the roses in the garden, her voice trembling as she admitted her past to Raphael West. "I didn't want to be that girl anymore, the one who smiled beside a monster, who helped him sell lies," she'd said, her eyes downcast. The weight of her time with Jason Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Global Travel, heavy on her shoulders. Raphael, 38, listened, his heart torn between the pain in her words and the danger her presence posed. That afternoon the storm broke in a different way. Jason Caldwell appeared on national media, his voice smooth and calculated, from an immaculate office. "Unfortunately," he said with a measured smile, "Mrs. Adriana Rains is a troubled young woman. She disappeared months ago with proprietary company data, and now she's resurfaced, conveniently living with my business rival, Mr. Raphael West." He paused, letting the insinuation sink in. "Make no mistake, this is not coincidence. This is corporate sabotage." Headlines erupted within minutes. Caldwell accuses rival of harboring corporate spy. Who is Adriana Rains? Heroine or hacker? Raphael West's mystery woman linked to scandal. Raphael's phone rang nonstop. PR agents, shareholders, attorneys, board members demanding explanations, the company thrown into crisis mode. Adriana watched from the edge of the room, numb and pale, her voice a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this." Raphael walked over, taking her hand gently, his voice low and steady. "You didn't drag me into anything, they did." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Jason doesn't scare me," Raphael continued, his tone firm. "I've dealt with him in boardrooms for years. But this time, it's not just business, it's personal." Adriana's voice broke, tears brimming. "They'll tear you apart for protecting me." Raphael squeezed her hand tighter. "Then let them try." In that moment, Adriana felt the weight of running lift. She wasn't alone anymore. The headlines were merciless. From PR girl to PR scandal, the woman between two empires. Online forums dissected her life, every archived photo, every Harmony Trails blog post, her face plastered on news tickers, debated by talk show hosts. Some painted her as a cunning manipulator, others a tragic beauty, but in every story she was more symbol than human. Adriana stopped reading after the third day, but the whispers followed, stares at the grocery store, conversations pausing when she entered a room, voicemails from old friends calling her a two-faced social climber. The sharpest pain came from Raphael's board. "The brand must remain clean," one executive said tightly. "Your relationship with Miss Raines is compromising our public image," another added. The CFO concluded flatly, "Distance yourself from this woman, or we bring in interim leadership." Raphael rose, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without a word. That night, Adriana found him on the terrace, the city skyline glittering below, his jaw tense as he gripped the railing. "You should let me go," she said quietly, her voice heavy with guilt. Raphael turned, his expression unreadable. "I never wanted to be a liability to you." "You're not a liability," he said, stepping closer, his voice calm but his eyes burning. "You reminded me why I built my hotels near villages, not on them, why I said no to Caldwell's Way. You reminded me what it means to care, to choose what's right, even when it's hard." He took her hands gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You don't need me to protect you, but I need you to remind me how to live with purpose." Raphael West stood on the terrace of his mansion, the city skyline glittering below, his hands gently holding Adriana Raines as he spoke with quiet conviction. "You don't need me to protect you, but I need you to remind me how to live with purpose," he'd said, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. Adriana's eyes glistened, the weight of the media storm and public scrutiny momentarily forgotten in the warmth of his words. A week later, they stepped into the spotlight together at the International Humanitarian Gala in Adriana, cameras flashing as Raphael entered the grand hall, his arm around Adriana. She wore a midnight blue gown, simple yet elegant, her posture calm, though her fingers trembled in his. They were seated at the front, the air thick with anticipation, as Raphael stepped up to the podium for his keynote speech. He looked over the glittering crowd, executives, diplomats, journalists, and began, his voice clear. "I was told my presence here tonight might reflect poorly on this organization because of the woman I chose to bring with me." A murmur rippled through the room. He paused, then continued, "Adriana Raines was once part of a company that betrayed the values this room claims to celebrate. But when she discovered the truth, she didn't stay silent. She walked away from privilege, from security, from her career, and she did it alone." He glanced at Adriana, her eyes glossy with emotion. "And then I, someone who built an empire around ideals, found myself too afraid to stand beside her." The room fell silent. "Well, not anymore," Raphael said, his voice strong. "She doesn't need my protection, but I need her clarity, her courage, to remind me that doing the right thing isn't always safe, but it's always worth it. I'm proud to be here with her, and if that offends anyone's brand, then your values were never real to begin with." Silence held for a moment, then applause erupted, slow at first, then rising like a wave. Raphael stepped down, returning to Adriana's side. She stood, and he pulled her into his arms, their foreheads touching, in the center of that blinding room, free from judgment in that shared moment. Back at the mansion, the fight continued. In Raphael's study, Adriana sat with a laptop, the 74-megabyte file containing emails, payment trails, and manipulated charity reports, evidence of Caldwell Global's exploitation, ready to be sent to the international press and a legal watchdog group. Her fingers hovered over the send button, the weight of her past heavy. Raphael placed his hand on hers, his voice soft. "You're not alone." She pressed send. Within hours, the media storm reignited, but this time, the lightning struck Caldwell Global. Whistleblower releases damning data. Former insider exposes exploitation. Jason Caldwell's smug grin vanished. He faced investigations, investors pulled out, and Adriana's name became a reckoning, not a scandal. But the fallout hit Raphael too. 3 Asian investment partners backed out, citing market conditions, though he knew the truth, too close to controversy. Shareholders murmured, and his advisors pushed for a rebrand, but Raphael made his choice. He stepped down as CEO, passing the role to his longtime COO, and issued a press release focusing on local initiatives. Then he and Adriana retreated to a quiet mountain lodge, his first property, a rustic eco-lodge where pine-scented air and misty trails offered refuge. They lived simply, brewing coffee on a gas stove, walking forest paths, and curling up by the fire at night, rediscovering peace together. Raphael West and Adriana Rains had found refuge in the quiet mountain lodge, a rustic eco-lodge where pine-scented air and misty trails replaced the chaos of their past lives. At 38, Raphael slept deeply, free from the weight of his former empire, while Adriana, 25, dreamed without fear, the ache of her lost past softened by their new beginning. But one evening, a hard rain fell, the sky bruised with thunderclouds, the mountain air sharp. Adriana stood on the porch, wrapped in a sweater too large for her, watching the storm roll across the valley. Raphael joined her, his steps quiet, and for a while they stood in silence, the rain's steady rhythm filling the space between them. Adriana turned to him, her voice barely above the wind. "If you could start over, if you could go back before you found me in that park, would you still stop?" Raphael looked at her, his eyes steady, the rain glistening on his face. "I'm not asking because I doubt you," she added quickly. After the scandal, the board, your company, everything we gave up, was it worth it?" Raphael reached out, brushing her damp hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "If I could live it all again," he said slowly, "I would still choose to walk that same path." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Even if the world didn't choose us," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, his voice firm. "I choose you, Adriana, even if the world never does." She clutched his shirt, burying her face against his chest as the rain poured harder, washing away the last of their doubts. The old lodge became more than a home. It became a sanctuary of purpose. Together, Raphael and Adriana transformed it into a program for women who'd survived hardship, widows, single mothers, survivors of abuse, many who'd once labored behind tourism's polished fronts. Raphael taught business basics, managing guest stays, designing hiking tours, building ethical partnerships, while Adriana gave the program its soul. Standing before each group, she shared her journey with raw honesty, her voice steady. "I thought losing everything would break me," she once said, "but it only stripped away what was never real." Her words sparked hope, and beyond the lodge, her memoir, The Quiet Exit, found a publisher, its pages resonating with readers. Letters poured in from women in shelters, young girls hiding truths, all saying, "You made me feel seen." Raphael watched Adriana flourish, stronger, freer, more radiant than ever, and realized he didn't just love her, he admired her. On the morning of their program's official launch, with pine trees overhead and a handmade banner swaying in the breeze, Raphael stepped forward, a small crowd of locals and guests clapping as he took the mic. "This lodge was where I learned to build a business," he said, "but today we begin building something greater. Community." He paused, his eyes finding Adriana. "And before we begin, I want to ask someone very important to join me." Adriana stepped forward, her heart racing, unsure. Raphael smiled, pulling a small box from his pocket. "The day I met you, you looked like someone who didn't want to be found, but I found myself the moment I found you." He knelt, sunlight breaking through the clouds. "I don't want a brand or a legacy. I just want to be the man who walks beside you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." They embraced, the crowd erupting in cheers, not just for love, but for a new beginning. 1 year after Raphael West proposed to Adriana Raines under the pine trees, the world had turned softer for them. Nestled between towering cliffs and a private stretch of shoreline stood the Driftwood home, a handcrafted wooden house kissed by sea breeze and wildflowers. Once a vision sketched in Raphael's notebook, it had become real, a mini resort with 5 cabins, each designed for peace, not luxury, a retreat for healing hearts. At 38, Raphael and Adriana, now 26, lived in the main house, the ocean's gentle rhythm greeting them each morning, stars watching over their sleep at night. Adriana's belly had rounded with early motherhood, her hands often resting protectively over their growing child, her glow a mix of peace and anticipation. Raphael no longer wrote business plans but pages of reflection. His manuscript, sustainable by heart, nearing completion, spoke of rebuilding an industry that had forgotten its people, villages left behind after tourist seasons, workers with no voice. Most of all, he wrote about the moment his life changed, not his first billion-dollar deal, but finding Adriana on a rainy night, lost and trembling. Adriana spent her mornings in the herb garden and afternoons answering letters from readers of her memoir, The Quiet Exit. Her podcast, Voices Between the Lines, where she interviewed survivors of emotional and corporate abuse, became a beacon of hope, her voice a healing balm for listeners. One rainy afternoon, as the tide rose, Adriana sat on the porch swing, a steaming cup of peppermint tea in her hands, her pregnant glow softened by the gentle rain. Raphael joined her, draping a blanket over their laps, the rain tapping on the wooden roof like a lullaby. Inside, the fireplace crackled, and on the mantel sat their cherished photo, a candid shot from the night Adriana nearly walked away, Raphael holding her in the garden storm, rain blurring their outlines, but their embrace clear. Adriana glanced at it, a wistful smile on her lips. "I used to think I was just a traveler," she said slowly, "a wanderer with no destination, someone who didn't belong anywhere." Raphael turned to her, his voice soft. "And I was a man building places for others to stay, without ever building a place to rest my own heart." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Funny, isn't it? We both thought we were lost. And all the while," he murmured, "we were walking toward each other." The wind picked up, and Raphael stood, reaching for her hand. "Come with me." Curious, Adriana followed, walking down the stone path, past the cabins to a new wooden archway overlooking the sea. A hand-carved sign read, "The Place We Stayed," and beneath it, a bench bore the etched words, "Found in the rain, chosen in the calm." Adriana touched it, overcome. "It's for us," Raphael said quietly, "for every moment we chose to stay, even when the world told us to run." They sat, watching the waves, the soft spray of salt on their skin. Raphael took her hand. "Whatever comes, this child, this life, I'm not going anywhere." Adriana leaned her head on his shoulder. "Neither am I." As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the waves, Raphael kissed her temple. "We didn't start like a fairy tale, but I'd take this ending over any crown or castle." Adriana smiled, her voice a whisper, "Because it's real, because we built it together." Together they stayed, softly, fiercely, completely. At last, they were home. Thank you for joining Raphael and Adriana's journey in A Millionaire Found an Unconscious Girl in the Park and Took Her to His Mansion when she woke up. Their story proves love can heal through storms, offering second chances and the courage to stay. We're grateful for your support at Timelens Stories. If their tale touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys. Drop a comment to share your thoughts. Your feedback means the world. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and keep believing in love that finds a home against all odds.